Okay, perfect. Adira, you can take it away.
All right. So, like I said, we're going to begin with a short interview of Rohan Bhaiya. So, we'll start this right now. So, first question. Manosphere bolte আমরা কি বুঝাই?
Um, okay, so I mean, there's it's a mix of a lot of things. I mean, I don't think Manosphere itself is one particular thing, which I think people get wrong. It's not like one website that has a bunch of videos or a bunch of opinions and stuff like that. There's, I think, a bit of a history into how it started. Um, like the space kind of started. I mean, one of the best places to get this information, I feel like, in my experience, like obviously research papers are great, but a nicer intro to this is the book that I referenced in one of my videos is Laura Bates's Men Who Hate Women. So I think the movement kind of started off with the involuntary celibate movement, which was ironically started by a woman. And then it was a forum online, which then spread out into like Reddit spaces, into um, you know websites, discussion groups, videos, and whatnot. I think right now what we mean by the manosphere is an amalgamation of like Reddit forums, 4chan forums, and a lot of social media videos. Um, so আমরা এখন ম্যানোস্ফিয়ার বলতে রেড পিল কন্টেন্ট বলতে যেটা বুঝি সেটা হইতেছে বেসিকলি যে the Andrew Tate-esque videos that we see by creators like Myron Gaines or HS Tiki Sneeko, and a lot of these folks. You know, the kind of narrative that they push through their videos. I think that's what we mean by the manosphere today.
Right. Would you say that the values of the manosphere has remained consistent over time or has the narrative changed?
I feel like it has radicalized. And the narrative definitely has changed a little bit. I feel like because where it started off, the idea of involuntary celibates, it was kind of like it came from a space of frustration, of romantic loneliness, and trying to find community and support with people who feel the same way. But এরপরে আস্তে আস্তে it became kind of a toxic space, I feel like. Um, so yeah, it has definitely radicalized into something that's more, how do I say, dangerous than it initially was. Um, I think the people within the space try to মানে একটু চেষ্টা করে যে একটু কাইন্ড অফ সামনে দিয়ে দেখানোর যে না আমরা এখনো সেম মাইন্ডসেটে আছি, বাট দে রিয়েলি নট। ইয়া
Mm-hmm. So you talk about these issues often online, right? That your content essentially like revolves around gender-based things. So what caused you to first begin speaking about these things? What motivates you?
So I think that's also a long conversation ish, but I feel like what in it mainly motivated me was my conversations with the women around me, where I kind of like আমি মানুষের like when I spoke to female friends, or when I spoke to like other women in certain community spaces or within my social circle, I realized the realities of their lives. But I think what kind of when I look back, যে কারণে আমি প্রবাবলি ম্যানোস্ফিয়ার টাইপের কন্টেন্টের দিকে লিন করি নাই was because of these conversations. And I feel like I understand why some people might lean into those kind of narratives, is because I grew up in a very misogynistic environment. Like আমার আশেপাশের মানুষজন were very typical Bangladeshi, very conservative minded, and আমার বন্ধু বান্ধব, আমি রাজুকে পড়তাম, so আমার বন্ধু বান্ধব were your average high school kids who were saying, creepy shit about women all the time. And I feel like এই এনভায়রনমেন্টের মধ্যে বড় হয়ে I could have easily leaned heavily into the red pill type content, but I think I had to sit with myself and unlearn a lot of those things to not. So I feel like it gives me a bit of a perspective, and I think ওইখান থেকে ওই মোটিভেশনটা আসে যে অন্যদের সাথে এটা নিয়ে কথা বলার, because I could have very easily been on the other side, right? So and যেহেতু I didn't, and I feel like where I am right now, like I realize that this is a much healthier space, which is why I would like to invite more people to kind of be a part of this.
Okay. Before we move on to the general panel, would you like to say or talk about anything else?
No, I think one of the things that people really misunderstand is the polarization, that I don't think there is a gender war. I think it's a very misconstrued idea where আমার just মনে হয় যে people just misunderstand what each side wants, and there is one specific, like, I mean, when we talk about feminism and feminists and women, their basic ask is human rights, whereas on the other side, if we look at men, if a lot of those conversations are coming from a space of privilege or entitlement, I think that's something that we question. And I think it's easily solved with discourse and conversations, which is why I lean heavily into that.
Why do you think people are so adverse to having conversations about these subjects?
I think one of the biggest reasons is that it's uncomfortable. মানুষ জানে না জিনিস, like how to approach these things, and there's a certain level of like apathy towards having these conversations, is because you feel very passionate about it, right? Because one of the reasons we are talking about this is because আমাদের core identity সাথে অনেক heavily relate করে এটা, right?
Yes.
I think that's where a sense of radicalization comes in, is because like we feel so passionately about our core identities, right? Like what makes us men or what makes us women, we identify those things and those attributes as masculinity and femininity, and we feel like these conversations question the identity that we've based our understanding on, and therefore we get very uncomfortable talking about it. Acha, like that's a little intense.
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, we will now move on to the general panel. So if Adpa, you would like to start?
Hello. So, while we talked about the manosphere, we shared some ideas about it. But when it comes to the mental health and pressure on men in today's generation, অথবা overall বলতে গেলে, because it has been a problem for a very long time. What do you think is the main struggle is on men in our society?
So when we talk about loneliness in men or men's mental health, I think first of all, let me. I think I'll probably want to establish that like I feel like a lot of the mental health issues that men face stem from the idea of loneliness, and a lot of a huge reason for that loneliness, in my opinion, is the inability to be vulnerable. Like I just spoke about it in one of the videos today, is that manush, like purush manush, obviously vulnerable হইতে পারে না and আমরা and especially like in societies where vulnerability is not discussed growing up, it's a very foreign concept. So আমরা জানিও না যে vulnerability বলতে আসলে কি বোঝানো হয়. So that's why like we don't really have those conversations, and when we don't have those conversations, they kind of like build up, and it ends up creating these echo chambers of not being able to open up and express ourselves. So I think that's kind of where a lot of these stem from. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you said that it's a foreign concept. So I wanted to ask you, Jay, this mental health, men's mental health নিয়ে যে আমরা কথা বলবো, we will talk about the issues. It was also মানে not মানে it was very মানে এটা ট্যাবু ছিল কাইন্ড অফ ওয়েস্টার্ন কান্ট্রিজে বলেন বা যেগুলো একটু ডেভেলপ কান্ট্রিজ মাইন্ডসেট দিয়ে ওখানে আগে এগুলো হইতো না, বাট নাও ইটস লাইক ওরা এটাতে অনেক গুরুত্ব দেয়, যেটা একটা মানুষের একটা ম্যানের কেমনে হইতে হবে, ওদের মেন্টাল হেলথকে প্রায়োরিটি দিতে হবে। ডু ইউ থিঙ্ক দে আর ডুইং বেটার নাও দেন আস, যে আমরা এখনো প্রোগ্রেস করতে পারিনি ওই দিক দিয়ে?
সো আই থিঙ্ক মানে আমরা যেভাবে জিনিসটাকে চিন্তা করি এটা প্রবাবলি ঠিক ওইরকম না, যে আমরা মনে করি যে ও দ্য ওয়েস্ট ইজ ডুইং আ লট বেটার, ওয়েস্ট সারাদিন মেন্টাল হেলথ নিয়ে কথা বলে হ্যান তেন। I don't think it's necessarily that. It's just that I feel like medical science has reached or understood mental health a little late. That's pretty much it, in my opinion. I feel like as medical science catches up, as the study of psychology catches up, and we slowly start understanding these things, I feel like different parts of the world understand and implement those studies into their practices. And I feel like যেহেতু বাংলাদেশের কাছে it's not something that was বাংলাদেশ থেকে হচ্ছে, I feel like Bangladesh or like people in other parts of the world feel like, oh, it's a Western concept. I don't necessarily think it's that. It's just that that's just where we are, and we can either choose to have some form of apathy towards it and be like, oh, এটা তো আসলে পশ্চিমা narrative, এটা তো আমরা মানবো না, অথবা it goes against our culture. It's not that. Like if it helps you, it helps, right? And I feel like I do see changes in the West, like living in Canada, আমি দেখি যে differences মানুষের মধ্যে যখন when men seek therapy. I'm not saying talk therapy works for everybody, but for most people it does, because like it's a scientifically researched solution to mental health issues.
All right, would anybody like
Yeah.
to add their own thoughts or answer the question too? Because we're in the panel portion of the discussion, so everybody
Yep.
can participate.
Can I chime in?
Of course,
Yeah,
go ahead.
for sure.
Roham, thanks for your input, because I actually was gonna ask you, like, how did you come across your experience of the manosphere or whatnot? Because it's interesting how you were describing it, right?
Mhm.
And based on a book, right? There's another. So I'll just talk about the manosphere and how I understand it, because I feel like you've probably gotten a very specific, well-publicized version of quote unquote the manosphere, right? The
Mhm.
incel culture, right?
Okay.
How I understand and how I know it is, I read a bit into it, and then so basically it actually starts off with the rise of the internet in the 90s, right? So obviously with the internet, with anything, right, or any sort of technology, what's one of the first things that actually propagated the use of the internet? Pornography, right? So adult material, whatnot, right? Now, beyond that, of course, that's to do with sex, right? There were these Usenet built discussion boards, right, where men were actually swapping notes amongst each other, like, hey, how do like sharing their experiences of their interaction with women, their dating life, and whatnot, right? So it kind of went from that, like, okay. And then what ended up happening was there emerged organically sort of what's called, I'm sure you're familiar with this, the seduction community, right? So that's where like, oh, you know what? Hey, this worked and that worked. They're basically swapping notes amongst each other and whatnot. Obviously, that led to what's called the rise of the pickup artist movement, right? I'm sure you know about that, the PUA. Now, when you're talking about red pill or whatnot, yes, there is different sects of it that have actually emerged because obviously it's not a monolith, right? So the way you're describing the incel portion of it, right? They're what's called the black pill. They're like the doomers. They're the ones who, because one of the tenets that I took away, right, is that it gives you a framework to actually improve yourself, right? Focusing on yourself. But then for a lot of people who actually do not want to do that, then they actually fall into those scopes like, oh yeah, women are bad, this and that. So basically sour grapes, right? So you have the incel community, and then you have, then what ended up happening was there are spaces on the Reddit, on subreddits, right? I'm sure you're all familiar with that. There was this, I think, in the late 2000s or whatnot, it emerged. And what actually probably put it into the limelight was a lot of the culture wars that happened in the West, right? So, for example, I'm sure you know about Jordan Peterson, right? The rise of Jordan Peterson, and he's known for very much right winger, right? But before he went into that direction, he was actually known as a very well-renowned professor, right, in Toronto, University of Toronto, I think, right? So I think it's interesting to actually look into that, because then you see in the late 2020, early 2010s, there was a bit of a cultural war that's going on, right? The reason why I actually mentioned this is because আমি যেটা দেখলাম বাংলাদেশে যে ম্যানেজমেন্টের যে কথাবার্তা যে আসতেছে, হ্যাঁ, it's kind of percolated downstream from what's happening in the West, or say in the internet culture sphere. Hey, and now a lot of the ideas, again, they're not necessarily good ideas. They're percolated, they're viral, right? The loudest voice, they may not be right. The most extreme voices that actually coming over. And then now you hear with a lot of the other what you call the manosphere coaches or whatnot, right? The Andrew Tate types. I've seen a few of the guys from Bangladesh. I was like, oh, okay. And what ends up happening is that a lot of the tenets of improving yourself kind of got co-opted, and what you have, what grift culture coming in, like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm gonna have like a foolproof solution if you follow this template, right? And also a lot of this quote unquote the science, right? They kind of take it from evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology, and then they co-opt it. Even though, for example, if you look at the notion of alpha beta কথাবার্তা বলে না, হ্যাঁ,
Yeah.
the interesting thing about it is that this is actually a miscode, because it was a study of wolves. They were not in the wild, but they were in captivity. ওখান থেকে, and the author of the study actually said that he regrets actually writing it as such. He actually disowns his own research about the whole alpha and beta sort of thing. And then there's this whole thing where I think a lot of some of it also stems from very, very archaic ideas about eugenics, because there's this notion of supremacy, right? There's where in order for me to actually raise myself, I have to put down others, right? I can go into that more, but that's fine. Yeah, so a lot of it, like for example, right now that it's in the spotlight, I think for a lot of the time, at least from my take on it, is that a lot of it has become grift economy, where whoever is the loudest, whoever is the most extreme, there's no, like you said, Roham, it's good that you have dialogues, but what happens with the internet age is that nuance gets lost, right? because everybody's reacting to everybody else. We're all just waiting to actually say our piece because we're all in our filter bubbles. Huh. So, for example, Roham, that's why I wanted to know your experience. Then you were talking about how you came across it, and you're talking to the people that you wanted to. I know for a fact that algorithmically, every one of us has our own algorithmic filter. So whatever we experience of reality of the internet, it's very much personalized. So we're not like always coming together like right now, and which is why I think these things are really important. যে আচ্ছা সামনাসামনি কথা বলে, then it's like, okay, what was like, if we see a piece of news filtered through algorithmic filters, that's where a lot of the misunderstanding and a lot of reactionary things happen. And I think it's good that you're actually bringing the discussion in the Bangladeshi space, because আমার মনে হচ্ছে যে অনেক সময় দেখা যাচ্ছে যে পশ্চিমা পশ্চিমা করে, but then that's forgetting the fact that no, we actually have real problems and we need to deal with it in our own way if need be. Yeah, we can take some notes from others. Yeah, so I'll just say this for now and pass it on to others.
Yeah. Did you have a question at the end of that, or just you wanted to add
No,
that?
I just wanted to add some perspective, because the thing is, তুমি যে বললা না, like when you mentioned the incel culture or whatnot, right? That's a very, very specific, like they call the black belt, right? And then, of course, in the quote unquote the manosphere, right? For example, you were talking about Myron Gaines and Andrew Tate or whatnot. These are the guys who are like very, very public, right? They're the loudest ones in the room. But it's interesting, like if you look at a lot of, for example, there are a lot of these writers. They're not there. For example, I'll give you a few names. You can look them up, right? Like say, for example, Rollo Tomasi. He's like, these are like online handles and whatnot. And then there's Ryan Stone and whatnot. What they all talk about is that you focus on yourself, right? To actually improve yourself, not necessarily to be like, oh, you want to have a culture war or whatnot. A lot of the things, for example, what Andrew Tate or Myron Gaines, or what they do is that these are what's the word? They always talk in terms of virality, whatever gets the loudest. And of course, in some of the things that they do, for example, talking about self-improvement and whatnot, it helps. But then when you're actually coupling that with a sort of attitude that is very, very adversarial, and that's actually very supremacist, then it becomes a problem, right? Like you mentioned talking to the women in your life, right? And I was like, oh, okay. What about the guys, for example? And yeah, it's true. It is actually kind of difficult because it's always quote unquote performative. Like, oh, hey, you're not doing this. Oh, you want to talk about your feelings? Oh, that's, they'll be very, very demeaning, or say homophobic, like, oh, they're being gay or whatnot. Are you a girl or whatnot? That's like very, very demeaning, right? And in my experience, I've actually seen that. Like, no, well, I think it's more of a lack of being able to articulate what it is that we're actually going through.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get into a lot of these conversations in the panel based off of the questions that the folks have. So once we do get into that, if you wanted to contribute then, or if you had questions about it then, you can go ahead. For now, I think we're just gonna progress with the itinerary that they have, so that
all right,
we give everybody time. Cool. But thank you for giving that insight, because like those are very important information, which I would have wanted to get into as well, but it gives people a good idea about the extent of the manosphere and how far it reaches on the internet itself. Yeah. Whoever wants to ask the next question.
Okay, so Zuhair, do you have anything to ask or anything to say before I ask him a question?
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay, so I wanted to ask that, according to you, Roham Bhaiya, do you think young men today feel comfortable talking about their emotions? Why or why not? Like, why do you think so? If yes, yeah, you can talk now.
Yeah, so I don't think young men today are comfortable talking about their emotions. And a lot of the reason why I would say is that honestly we haven't learned it growing up. We haven't learned it from our parents. We haven't learned it from the people around us. We don't see it at all. So I think that's a huge reason as to why we are not emotionally open. We don't have conversations about our mental health or emotions. And yeah, I think এই জিনিসগুলা যদি মানে কালচারালি আমাদের মধ্যে ইনগ্রেইন থাকতো তাহলে হয়তো আমাদের ওপেন আপ করা ইজি হইতো। And I personally believe like having conversations about like having emotional conversations about having conversations about mental health and like what we're going through and what we're struggling with is very important. There's a lot of people, especially men, who believe that it isn't. And I think those are the conversations that we need to have. Those are the people that we need to kind of ask to understand like why they think so, like because that's kind of like that's where you get the perspective of যে কেন মনে করে um, যে I'm going through something. Why would I not want to talk about it, and how is that healthy? And if I don't want to talk about it, is it because I don't have the avenues to talk about it, the agency to talk about it, or is it because I don't want to and I don't want to learn how to? So those are the questions I think that we kind of need to answer. And I was also going to say, if any of you are on Instagram, if you wanted to kind of look at the comments that are coming in, and if you like at any point if you wanted to like bring one of those in, feel free to.
I have a question for Roham Bhaiya. Like, how did you come to
Yeah.
distinguish from red pill to blue pill? And that is it.
I mean, define what you mean by blue pill in this context.
Well, like in the manosphere, like especially for the incel community,
Mm-hmm.
like red pill is something like, yeah, you're above everybody else and you need to be as rigid as you can. Doesn't matter whether
Sorry, you cut off there. Could you say that one more time?
there's
I think it's if he turns off his video, maybe his audio would come in
Yeah.
better. ভিডিওটা অফ করে মাইকটা রাখো।
Okay, we're gonna let him fix that. I guess I'm not I wouldn't say I exactly understand what like people would mean by the blue pill, because like I mean the references are from the Matrix. I mean that by taking the red pill you basically get to see the truth and you know how the society has mistreated you, and now you can fix it, or now you can make your own decisions. And blue pill is that you just stay ignorant. But I feel like what kind of a lot of people may touch on, I'm guessing that's where he was trying to go as well, was that do we dive into these pieces of information, or do we stay like I wouldn't say ignorant, or like do we just ignore, like do we avoid confrontation with certain narratives? Because আমার কাছে মনে হয় যে কিছু মানুষ মনে করতে পারে যে ইদার সাইডের ব্যাপারে আমি রেড পিল কন্টেন্ট দেখলামই না বা ম্যানোস্ফিয়ার কন্টেন্ট দেখলামই না, অথবা আরেকজন মনে করতে পারে আমি ফেমিনিস্ট কন্টেন্ট দেখলামই না। I think that automatically creates echo chambers, and that in and of itself is a problem. Ami, as somebody who you would expect consumes a lot of feminist content, I do look at a lot of manosphere content. I do look at a lot of right-wing extremists, radicalized, misogynistic content. Like, obviously, like, they don't come on my personal Instagram's feed, but I will at times make Instagram accounts just so that I particularly follow these right-wing creators, just so that I have an understanding of where their mindsets stem from, like, and their perspectives, তারা কিভাবে এবং কেন এগুলা জিনিস নিয়ে চিন্তা করে। Yeah.
Right. I believe as we discuss further, we will go deeper in the topic. Right now, I usually at the tip of the iceberg, right? On the current topic that
Yeah.
about sila was on the general mental health, right? Mafid, you can rejoin, and then once we progress to that section, we can discuss about it. Like,
Question: how
yeah,
long are we expecting this panel to go on for? I just wanted to have an idea.
not more than an hour.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yep. Okay, would you guys like to add anything in terms of like how the comfort men feel in being vulnerable in today's world?
Can you reframe that question again?
Yeah, of course. So the question was that, do you think young men today feel comfortable talking about their emotions? Why or why not? So Rohanbhai answered it, but do you guys have alternative viewpoints?
I think I'm gonna add to. I agree with what Roham actually said. There is, for example, there's this great YouTuber, Healthy Gamer GG. I think you're familiar with that guy. Anyway, he talks about how this inability to articulate one's emotion actually comes from a place of being blind to it in the first place. And I think for a lot of guys, for a lot of men, boys and men, right? I think what it actually becomes, and speaking from personal experience, is that the default emotion then becomes anger and rage, because there's comes from a place of frustration, right? Because again, I think if I may venture to be a little controversial, be like, yeah, men and women do experience emotions differently, but at the same time, women have a greater capacity for articulating it, because yeah, there are brain differences and whatnot, but that doesn't excuse us for actually addressing our own issues, right? So I think what ends up happening, so the reason why I mentioned Healthy Gamer GG is that he mentioned this condition called alexithymia, and it's not a condition per se, it's more of a, you'll have to look into it, I'll share it, but that's when I first understood, like, oh, okay, I'm unable to like feel emotions, because I think societally and culturally, right, we're in a, I think I'll talk about in the Bangladeshi context, whatever you're actually feeling emotionally, whatnot, right, for boys and men, there's a very narrow band in which you can actually express it, right, whether through accomplishments, whether through competition and whatnot, which again, on some level, yes, it's an outlet, but it does limit it, right? So being able to articulate that, I think that's where the challenge is. And I don't necessarily think, I may agree that I can take notes like how women actually share about things and whatnot. For example, I've had partners where I've talked to women in my life, like, yeah, they're actually able to talk about things willy-nilly, but we're not as easily opening up. And I think the issue actually kind of becomes, I think, amongst ourselves. Like, for example, I think I asked Roham or my guy friends and whatnot, like, hey, like, have you talked about this or whatnot? Like, I try to, what I took away from actually reading a lot of psychology, a lot of quote unquote red pill authors, right, is that a lot of the times they won't exactly open up unless and until you give them permission to do so. And I think women actually do so openly, like freely, but at the same time, for us guys to be like, oh, hey, talking about quote unquote, like when you talk, since we're talking about mental health, depression, anxiety, right, health issues and whatnot, I think I've noticed this is again personal experience, may not apply to others, but like talking about it, being the first person to do that, while it may be reacted to like, oh no, I don't talk about this, it actually gives other guys permission to do that. And
Yeah.
then of course it takes a bit of effort because again, not being able to articulate it. And what I found actually really helpful is that whenever, for example, if I were to talk about my own struggles or whatnot, yeah, sure, I'll be called out for like, oh, are you being weak or something like that. It's like, no, not really. I'm just talking about it because I found out that the more personal someone's struggle is, the more universal it actually is, right?
Yeah.
And again, I found this helpful in the sense that talking with guys, they won't always open up. But of course, because always there's this whole mask we have to have, like we're performing, like yes, I think Rohan made this comment on Instagram, like, oh, playing FIFA and talking about protein gains and whatnot, right? That's like, yeah, I think that's like a surface level thing, right? And I found it, I was
Yeah.
interested, I was actually, that kind of caught me like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what we do a lot. We do a lot of this performance thing because there's an expectation of us and it doesn't necessarily always help us, right?
Yeah. And আমার কাছে এই একটা জিনিস, সো ইটস ভেরি ইন্টারেস্টিং বিকজ এই জায়গাটাতে আমি অনেক রিলেট করি, কারণ আমার মনে হয় যে আমি আজকে এটা নিয়ে বলতেছিলাম যে আমি ইমোশনালি ভেলারেবল হইতে পারি না, মানে মানুষের সাথে তো ইন জেনারেল পারি না, তার উপরে লেট অ্যালোন মেন, বিকজ মানে মেন ইন মাই লাইফ মানে ডোন্ট ক্রিয়েট দ্যাট স্পেস ফর মি টু ওপেন আপ টু দেম, বিকজ ওদের লাইফে কেউ ওদের জন্য ওই স্পেসটা ক্রিয়েট করে না। সো মানে we just
Yeah.
genuinely don't know how to do that, and this creates যে অনেক বড় একটা প্রবলেম ক্রিয়েট করে এটা, কারণ আমার মানে মনে হয় যে এই যে this is what I was talking about আজকে, যে মানে যেহেতু পুরুষ মানুষ এই জিনিসটা করে না, তারা ইমোশনালি ফার্স্ট অফ অল ওপেন আপ হয় না, and they don't create that space for other men to open up with them. What happens with men who are trying to be emotionally healthy and open up to is we resort to opening up to women. আমাদের কমিউনিটি স্পেসেস এর যেসব মেয়ে মানুষ আছে আমরা তাদের কাছে ওপেন আপ করি because they have the emotional capacity, but we have to understand the reason they have that emotional capacity is because they've worked on those um, skills, and it is a skill, it is not a defect, it is not a gendered thing that like, oh, purush মানুষ just by birth emotionally vulnerable হতে পারে না. I think that's bullshit, because like everybody is able to teach themselves these specific skills. So when we resort to unloading those emotional burdens on women, not only do women have to deal with their own bullshit and patriarchy, they also have to take on our emotional burden. যে এখন I have to baby this man who is only talking about himself because he has absolutely no other outlet, and we create this মানে problematic space because এখন women are burnt out from listening to men, যে and then you have women saying যে bro, if all you're going to do is whine and not create relationships with people, then it's not a two-way street anymore, and it kind of exhausts itself, the relationships exhausts itself, and that's why we have these colliding narratives between these two genders, because like we need to give each other the space and we need to create spaces within ourselves. Like the way women interact with other women, open up to other women is immaculate. Like I'm always jealous of that. The way women support women is like, like there's girls, there's no man's man or whatever. Like, and as
I can
soon
be
as
your
you
man's
say
man.
something like that, yeah, but like as soon as you say something like that, somebody in the comments is gonna go like, bro, that's gay, and that's the whole problem.
Oh yeah, yeah.
মানে
No, I hear you, man.
তুই বেটা কথা বলবি না, সারাদিন লোনলি থাকবি, আর তার উপরে মানে as soon as somebody says যে ভাই আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে আই বল আমার কি হইছে, and you're gonna be like, nah bro, that's gay. Like, what do you want?
We have our
Yeah.
own code, maybe. I don't know. Hey, I want to have Muffin come in because I think he's been waiting to talk. Speaking of making
So
space.
for
There-
men's emotional aspect, I believe that I often notice that many of these very communities that claim to care about men's struggles, yet when men actually become vulnerable, like Roham Bhaiya gave an example, JK Ashley, hoche gay, hand, and they try to, demean you in any way they can. They're mocked and dismissed, are told to man up. This creates a cycle where men learn that opening up is unsafe. As a result, many remain silent about their struggles, and the stigma around vulnerability continues. If we generally care about men's mental health, we need to create spaces where we can speak honestly without fear of being ridiculed. When someone's vulnerability is constantly dismissed, mocked, or treated as weakness, it can have serious consequences. Many boys, young men, grow up with the message that they should always be strong, self reliant, and emotionally controlled. When they don't fit that expectation, they may. Wait a minute, my phone's not working properly.
No worries.
Oh, well, when they don't fit that expectation, they may begin to question their own worth or feel that something is wrong with them. And that isolation can contribute to anxiety and depression. For my case, like from childhood, as I started to grow as a human being, I started to notice how quickly people decided who I was supposed to be, not because of who I actually was, because of small things, how I spoke, what I liked, even the colors I wore. As a child, I painted my nails, played with dolls, enjoyed things that many people labeled as for girls. To me, they were just toys, colors, and ways to express myself. But other people often treated those things as evidence that something was wrong with me or that I wasn't being a proper boy. And all that sort of led me into this dilemma that, yeah, there is something wrong with me. But as I started to realize and started to research into these things a lot more, I came to terms with that, yeah, there is nothing wrong with me. It's just when these things are reflected back from other people's eyes, only that is when there is something wrong with it. Like, so what I want to ask is that have you ever felt that, pressure from society for not being the ideal man that they ought a boy to be?
Yeah, all the time, bro. Like I feel like you'll get the most hits when you hit Control F and search for gay on any of my videos comment sections. Because like that's what people say the most. And I feel like that has not only in the past, but it's like not that particularly, but this stigma, like হ্যাঁ, of course, and this is also something that I find interesting যে হ্যাঁ আমি এখন জানি যে ইমোশনালি ওপেন আপ করা is obviously not gay, it's very healthy and every man should be doing that, কিন্তু আমি what I'm realizing every day is that আমি যেহেতু ছোট্টবেলা থেকে এই জিনিসটা করে আসি নাই, আমি এখনো এই জিনিসটা করতে পারি না এবং করতে অনেক আনকমফোর্টেবল লাগে এবং আমি যখন আমার কাছে মনে হইতেছে আমি করতেছি, but it's not like I'm not doing it in a healthy way, and that's what I'm or in a way that's effective, and এই জিনিসগুলা is something that I think as men we need to learn, because আমাদের অনেকের কাছেই মনে হইতে পারে যে ও আমি তো কথা বলি, আমার তো অনেক ফ্রেন্ডস আছে যাদের সাথে আমি সারাদিন ইমোশনস নিয়ে কথা বলি, but are we really fostering those relationships, or are we really talking about it in ways that it's helping each other? That is a question that I feel like we rarely answer, and I think that's something that we should also kind of focus on as we have these conversations, as we learn about emotional intelligence and like emotional health. I feel like this is what we miss out on, and I think yeah, it's pretty simple if you think about it, but it's also very difficult because আমাদের কোনো ফ্রেমওয়ার্ক নাই। সো আমরা যত এই জিনিসটা নিয়ে এক্সপ্লোর করবো তত জানতে পারবো, and I think এই exploration জিনিসটা should happen with other men, because those other men are also probably trying to figure things out. So obviously it'd be a good time to, like, I don't know, like have a gossip sesh with your boys, or something like that, instead of just playing FIFA. Like, play FIFA and talk about feelings. I don't know.
Play FIFA, smoke shisha, as they say, right?
Yeah, but smoke shisha and also
Yeah,
talk. You know.
yeah. Shoot the shit, right? I
Yeah.
I was gonna laugh. I wanted to make a couple of jokes, but that's fine. Gossip session with the boys. I think I'm gonna call it that. Okay,
Yeah.
so okay. I'm gonna
Yeah,
take what Marfin said. Actually, no, Zuhair, do you wanna chime in?
yeah, Romba, I agree with you on this. That's why I think manosphere is a reaction to real issues that men face, like
Hmm.
loneliness, lack of guidance, and uncertainty in their role of in society.
Okay.
I personally support the improvement and personal responsibility aspect, but I don't think blaming women or become bitter is productive or is the solution.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm glad you actually brought that up, because like I would want like a little bit of insight into somebody who finds some form of benefit in the self improvement aspects of manosphere. So I would want to ask you, Jay, if the self improvement narratives from the manosphere are helpful for you, um, why would you want that conversation or those advice coming from somebody or a space that is associated with hatred or with, like, blaming women? Like, would you not rather have that come from people who don't have those views?
Are you asking the panel or Zuhair?
I'm
So
asking
so
Zuhair.
so so
Zuhair,
so
yeah.
so we're human, right? We're mixed with
Mm,
various opinions. So that's up to us, like what we consume.
mhm.
I personally think we should watch the whole show, like feminist thing and the manosphere also, and the toxic thing also. Then we can like judge, and like from our consciousness we can like decide what to choose and what's better. That's like different individuals point of view, right? So
100%. Do you think there is a lack of good feminist self improvement coaches or content creators?
no, there are.
There are, right? So, do you think it would be beneficial for people to follow them instead of the manosphere content creators?
No, I won't say instead of them. I
Uh-huh.
think you should follow both. Like I said earlier, you should like consume like both, so you know the whole story, like every
Okay.
aspect, like what they're thinking and what they are thinking, and you can then you can like do calculation and bring your own thoughts and own
Okay.
opinions. What's right?
Right. So what I'm trying to understand is that, are we watching those manosphere content creators from completely research point of view, যে আমার সব কিছু দেখা উচিত, জানা
Yeah,
উচিত, যাতে
yeah,
আমি সবকিছুর ব্যাপারে জানি?
yeah. That's
Or
my point of
are
view.
we okay, but তাহলে আমরা ফলো করতেছি তাহলে ফেমিনিস্ট কন্টেন্ট ক্রিয়েটরদের, মানে to implement in our lives, right? Or I'm not, like,
Now,
আমরা
what I'm trying to say is
হুম,
like we should consume both, সবকিছু জানার জন্য।
আচ্ছা, মানে
তারপর
আমি
ইমপ্লিমেন্ট
বুঝাইতে চাইতেছি, হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ,
ইমপ্লিমেন্ট আমি পুরোটা আমি যেটা বলছি যে আমি
হুম,
টক্সিক সাইড থেকে প্রমোট করি না। সো
হুম।
আমি পুরোটা দেখতেছি, তো আমি জানতেছি। সো আমি একটা সাইডকে করতেছি না, আমি নিজের পয়েন্ট অফ ভিউ থেকে বলতেছি আর কি।
আচ্ছা, আচ্ছা। মানে আমার প্রশ্নটা হচ্ছে যে বেনিফিটটা কি? মানে আমার পার্সোনাল লাইফে বেনিফিটটা কি আসতেছে আমার সব জিনিসগুলো দেখে? আমি জানতে পারতেছি, রিসার্চ হচ্ছে
হ্যাঁ,
আমার। আমি সবকিছুর ব্যাপারে অনেক জানি। কিন্তু অ্যাকচুয়ালি ইমপ্লিমেন্টেশন এ আমার সেলফ ইমপ্রুভমেন্ট এর জন্য, বিকজ আমি তো অ্যাজ ইউ সেড আমি এগুলা জিনিস দেখতেছি সেলফ
হুম,
ইমপ্রুভমেন্ট এর জন্য। So,
হুম।
আমার সেলফ ইমপ্রুভমেন্ট এর জন্য আমার ২ সাইড দেখে কি স্পেসিফিক বেনিফিট হচ্ছে? বা আমি যদি চিন্তা করো সেলফ
ইয়া
ইমপ্রুভমেন্ট বলতে আমি
হুম,
ধরলাম জিম করা। সো আমি চিন্তা করো আমি জিম কনটেন্ট দেখতেছি।
Mm-hmm.
এখন আমি তুমি করে বললাম bro, I don't know
Yeah,
what
no,
your
no,
age is.
totally fine.
সো আমি এক জিম কন্টেন্ট দেখতেছি, সো জিম কন্টেন্ট আমি এমন একজনের কাছ থেকে দেখতেছি, there are two people, one someone who has regressive views, and the other someone who has open respectful views. If I'm consuming the same gym content, why would I rather not consume it from somebody who I align with in terms of views, who I think is respectful? আমি
Mhm.
বলতেছি না যে politically aligned and stuff
Mhm.
like that, that's a different story. But আমি বলতেছি যে যে জিনিসটা আমি বিলিভ করি is হিউম্যান রাইটস এর জন্য ভালো,
Mhm.
বেসিক বেস লেভেল রেসপেক্ট,
Mhm.
তাহলে আমি ওরটা না দেখে শুধু জিম কন্টেন্ট কনজিউম করাই যদি আমার পারপাস হয়, তাহলে আমি
Mhm.
অন্য মানুষেরটা কেন দেখতে যাব? অন্য মানুষেরটা আমি তখন দেখবো যখন আমি জানতে চাবো যে ওদের মাইন্ডসেটটা কি, পয়েন্ট অফ
রাইট রাইট রাইট, দ্যাটস মাই পয়েন্ট। আমি ওটাই বলতে চাচ্ছিলাম যে ওদের পার্সপেক্টিভটা কি, ওরা কিভাবে ভাবতেছে, ওরা কেন হেট্রেড এক্সপ্রেস করতেছে, কেন ওরা ডিফারেন্ট।
রাইট। সো লাইক আই এম জাস্ট asking যে
সো
because
রিয়েল
I
লাইফে
probably don't know.
ডে টু ডে লাইফে এটা হেল্প করে কমিউনিকেশন বিল্ড আপ করতে।
আচ্ছা, are there any particular creators that you would kind of recommend in terms of self improvement? Or you can think about it, you can kind of type it in
Bangladesh
the
na
chat.
worldwide.
I would say worldwide.
Worldwide. Hmm.
Yeah, you guys
Like-
can kind of type it in the chat if you can't think of
Hang
it
on,
right
like
now.
in terms of what, like for example, going to the gym, তুমি যেটা রোহাম যেটা বললো না, like
Yeah,
gym
sure.
content creation. Like for example, there's this one guy, again, just completely positive. Joey Swole নামে একজন আছে, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys know about him, right? He calls out behavior, right? Regardless of man or woman or in between, right? Doesn't matter. And I think that's like a very good example of it. But also,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I actually just want to point out it's very interesting, and we have to be very, very. It's hard to do actually, to be very aware of the language we use. Like consuming, right? Oh, I want to consume this content and that content, and this is where a problem is a lot of the time. I'm gonna feed say, just take it at face value, right? Who reads nowadays, right? Which is something I would say I lucked out on. Like for example, I came across my exposure to the manosphere was when the only ways to actually do that is if you actually had to read authors or whatnot, and there was this whole back and forth, right? এখন কি হচ্ছে যে now it's like package, and interesting that Roham, you mentioned the whole gym content creator and then the toxic stuff, because it is actually a pipeline for a lot of these creators. It's very subtle. Aste aste, like, oh, you go to gym, and then some of those ideas that they talk about or whatnot, right? It becomes very much extremist. I can look it up and actually share later. But yeah, it's very, very easy to kind of fall into that rabbit hole. The issue, what I take away is that agency, নিজের একটা agency থাকা দরকার, not just like consume it, right, passively, then be like parroting it out. I was like, wait, hang on a minute. You have a brain. We all have, our own minds. We can think about it, right, and actually see, okay, what am I okay with, what am I not okay with, right? And I think in that sense, yes, sure, like feminist content creators or whatnot, they actually are for more towards equality and justice. At the same time, I will also like sit to play the devil's advocate, Jay. There are a lot of rhetoric that actually does harm men, or quote unquote, they say toxic feminism or whatnot. Like we'll have to acknowledge that, right? I think the problem becomes where it's sort of like a reactionary agent. Oh, acha, hey, these are like man haters or whatnot, so I'm gonna go over to that side. I was like, no. The way I take away, like for example, manosphere or whatnot, there's this word I came across. It's really interesting. It's called praxeology. Basically, it's like a framework. I think what a lot of people do is that whenever with others, we're trying to confirm our own belief systems by hanging out with people who agree with us. And I think whenever we come across this person doesn't agree with me, I'm reactionary. I was like, no, I'm not gonna be cool with you. But I think it's more important to actually seek out wait, am I willing to be wrong? Am I willing to actually debate? Am I willing to be corrected? And I think for a lot of guys, because It's like the Andrew Tates or Myron Gaze or whatnot, they actually fill a gap, right? They talk to the boys and men that, oh, he's speaking my mind. At the same time, পরে দিয়ে বলে যে আচ্ছা, talking about something that actually helps them, কিন্তু ওটার পর সঙ্গে সঙ্গে আরেকটা কথা বলে যেটা they're not exactly okay with, but because they're like, oh no, you know what, this person has helped me, I'm gonna let this one slide, this thing slide. But then it becomes this whole rabbit hole যে আচ্ছা মানে টেনে নিয়ে নেয়, ওই যে গ্রুপ থিং থাকে না। হ্যাঁ, I think the my takeaway is that you have to be you have to have your own agency and think and actually say, okay, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, okay, just leave it aside. For a lot of people, that's actually difficult because it's like groupthink. It's like, oh, are you, like, for example, oh, that's gay, right? I'll give you a sort of like a story where কি জানি বললো, হাসিবুন, right? মাফিন বললো না,
1
হ্যাঁ, যে
second.
growing up, oh, he'd get
Apologies to
teased and all
interrupt,
that. Sorry.
but right, apologies for interrupting, but Rohamba, can you check the live stream? It is not streaming.
Yeah, I know. I did check. I started it again on Instagram
Okay, thank you.
because it wasn't
Continue.
working. Yeah. And also I just wanted to kind of clarify with Adira as well, like how are we doing in terms of time and like where we are at.
Almost an hour.
Right, we
Yeah.
actually ended up discussing most of like the future topics that we were supposed to discuss after this conversation. So after this, I think we will have 20 more minutes left and then it's over.
Okay. Yeah. We can continue the conversation in terms of whatever, like as long as like what I'm trying to make sure is that we cover everything that we wanted to and then get into discussions, because I love having back and forth, that I could do it all day, but at the same time I want to make
It's
sure
a process.
that we're getting through.
Yes, no worries, we have
what we
been
want to.
covering like naturally, which I'm grateful for.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in that
Go
case, I'm gonna spare my story or whatnot because I think it's more important to get some of the points across. Mafin একটা কথা বলতো, and then I think Roham, you said something like, oh, that's very gay or whatnot. It's
Yeah.
interesting. There's a comedian, he made this really good joke. I can't remember his name, but he said something about straight guys having the hardest of time trying to prove how straight they are, in the
Yeah.
sense that it becomes like performance. And I will
Yeah.
say this phrase, it's called burden of performance. It's like you always have to perform, whether or not whatever you're feeling and whatnot, right? So it's almost like, yeah, growing up societally, yeah, you have that, like, what do you do for work, how much do you earn, what do you have, you know, all these markers of success and signaling, right, regardless of who you are as a person, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure, you know, in Bangladesh we have that, right, status thing, right? So when it becomes a performance, I think je Mafin jeta bollo je inside community, there is a disconnect, like, oh, be aloof, go to the gym, be strong and whatnot. These are actually objectively good advice, but I think the frustration actually comes from this disconnect between the idealism of it and where you are. So we kind of want to go
Gotcha.
that process of actually improving yourself incrementally. That's like that hard work that's needed. For example, Roham Jeta Bolona, just having that emotional acuity, talking to, say, the men in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, I have the women in my life actually asking, like, my mom or my grandma, like, hey, fondiche. None of the men in my life actually do that, right? And it really speaks to, like, oh, hang on a minute, what's going on, right? And yeah, so the whole performative thing, the performance thing, I think on some level there you have to have a certain level of delusion in terms of how you want to improve yourself. But the problem, সমস্যাটা হচ্ছে যখন when there is a certain level of quote unquote self-fulfilling prophecy you want to have for yourself, and then it can become borderline supremacist, because it's like, oh, I'm actually better. Like, if you think of yourself as a better version, like, okay, I'm gonna make myself better, I think you can see easily it can become like, oh, I'm better than others, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where a problem is. It's like, in order for me to raise myself up, I have to put others down. And I'm mone hocche Bangladesher somaje, I think we have that a lot in and of itself, right? Are just the toxic behaviors. And I'm kind of glad that, Roham, that, you know, you verbalize and you talk about these things, even though you may have a lot of people disagreeing with you. I think the conversation is actually really important. At the same
Yeah.
time, like I will say, yeah, we will disagree on a lot of points. But for example, one of the things that I actually do talk about, it's positive masculinity. What are the things that we find about ourselves? And like, for example, um, uh, the fathers in our lives or the uncles in our lives, like they're not all evil or whatnot, right? ভালো তো আছেই. And I think we need to start sort of like having a discussion at the same time. ওই যে বলো না পারফরমেন্সের কথা বলছি না, like oh, you have to, like, you can perform, quote unquote, but at the same time doing that work that needs to be done. I think for us men, it's what's the word I want to say, I think we seldom have that support system to actually get that done. And Rohan, তুমি একটা কথা বলছিলা, um you said you're talking about you envy people, like women who are able to actually have that. I think it's good to be inspired by that, but I think we shouldn't exactly mimic what they do. আমাদের নিজেদের মধ্যে যে কথাবার্তা যে বলতে হবে, I think we have to kind of figure out our own way of actually doing that. Hey, we
Yeah,
can take notes
absolutely.
and whatnot. Hey,
Yeah, I
So-
would actually, like, that's a very interesting point. Like, there's a couple of points that I wanted to touch on what you said. One of the things is that where you said, Jay, um, so I'll start with the one that you just said, like in terms of like not mimicking exactly what women do, but like try to take in what we think is good and then build on that. I think that's great. I'm not necessarily saying, Jay, we do exactly what the girly pops do. What I'm saying is that we keep that as a some form of space to reach, and then we figure out our own how to get there.
Yeah.
Because like obviously it's not gonna, like, ami jodi ekhon, like if I consider something as a success story and I say that I want to get there tomorrow, obviously we're not gonna be able to do that because we don't know how to, we can't run before we learn how to walk. So
Yeah.
I get that, but I also feel like those are things that we take inspiration from, in the sense that they consistently are doing this, right? They're consistently like trying to, like, one of the things that I have a struggle with when I have these conversations with men is that we live in a system that disproportionately serves men, and we're still emotionally less intelligent than women. That's sad, right? And that's something that we should definitely like work on or like acknowledge. If we're having these issues, there's something definitely that the girls are getting right. So what can we take away from that instead of like, hating on them, right? So I think that's definitely a conversation that we can have. And one of the other things that I wanted to touch on was the fact that in terms of the role models or in terms of the content that we consume, because I'm glad you brought up Joey Swole, because I actually referenced Joey Swole in one of my videos as a positive role model, but then I do disagree with a lot of what he says and his viewpoints. And that brings in the dichotomy of like whether or not we should necessarily like, one, consume, two, follow, and three, kind of put people on a pedestal who may not hold all the right ideas. Because one of the things that I disagree with Joey Swole on is that he has a lot of transphobic views and a lot of at times homophobic views, and sometimes he does have a certain particular distaste towards how women carry themselves in the gym, and I feel like he kind of doubles down on that much more necessarily than other things, which I feel like is a little bit like, it's a bit of an
Wait, can
ick for
you
me.
repeat that? Can you repeat that statement again? I just wanted to like.
Yeah, so like Joey Soul kind of highlights how women carry themselves in the gym much rather than like men or other things, like particularly in terms of modesty, in terms of like how the clothes that women wear and stuff like that, which
Mm.
he doesn't necessarily do as much with men. I'm not saying he doesn't. I have seen him make videos on guys checking themselves out in the locker rooms, like opening their cameras and stuff like that, and like
Yeah.
men shirtless inside the gym. I know he's made videos on that, but particularly he has a big issue with women being, according to him, immodest in the gym, and kind of like, because that's my whole idea, like, are we the ones sexualizing the women, or is it them who are doing that, right?
I
Because
mean,
that's
to take that one example of that creator, I think we can nitpick, but it is actually, it does bring about a further discussion needed to be had, right? Oh, it's interesting actually. Now that you reminded me of something. Wait, I saw this video. Some hujur and some guy was saying like, oh, if a woman, okay, here's this is always interesting. Okay, if a woman dresses in a certain way, right? Or the বলতেছে যে হ্যাঁ ওভাবে dress করলে তো I can't control myself. I was like, আমি ভাবতেছি যে ভাই আচ্ছা, like if you can't control yourself, isn't it more of a reflection on you than it is on the person? I just
absolutely.
Again, this is obviously sort of like not addressing what you brought up, but yeah, I mean, I just wanted to bring that up. It's like, okay, I see a woman who's attractive. Like I'm straight, I'm heterosexual, right? And I'm like, oh, she's like really attractive, right? And like, sure, I could, like, go up to her and chat her up and talk to her or whatnot, right? But the notion of not being able to control myself, I find that a little, like, that actually gives away, like, maybe work on that. I'm not saying like to deprive yourself or whatnot, right? And I can, of course, go into the fact that one of the things that, for example, I'll tell you like how I got into the whole quote unquote manosphere. It's like I was just going into self improvement, right? Like, self improvement and whatnot. And one of the offshoots of that was like, oh, how do you become a more attractive person, right? To the opposite sex, or to whatever, right? And then it became that way where, oh, okay, so how you become attractive as a person, visually, behaviorally, and whatnot. And I think for a lot of people now, it's become, a lot of that has become co-opted, in the sense that ওই যে বললাম না, যারা মনে করো ওদের একটা ulterior একটা এজেন্ডা থাকে। আর একটা জিনিস হচ্ছে যে, I think what we also need to be careful is ideologies. হ্যাঁ, because then একটা কথা আছে না যে we don't have ideas, ideas have us, right? So what we don't want is to get caught up in an ideology that somebody's actually spewed and we preach it as gospel. হ্যাঁ, and I think আমার মনে হচ্ছে যে, and what ends up happening is that if you look at our socio-political landscape, that's what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Idealism. But anyway, coming back to what you were talking about, I think this is a further discussion to be had, and there's nuances and whatnot. And like you said, আমি যেটা বললাম এর আগেও যে, take the good, but then you may not actually agree with the bad, but also highlight that, like, yeah, I don't necessarily agree with this.
Yeah,
I think the problem,
think that's one of the things,
বলো,
যে
বলো।
pointing out and verbalizing publicly that দেখেন এই মানুষটার কথা আমি এখানে agree করি, but I particularly disagree with it. Like, I feel like one of the biggest conversations within this space is যে আচ্ছা, do I platform people who may have different views? Do I platform people who have problematic views? And if I do, how do I go about it, right? Because let's say I'm working on creating a platform, and I'm going to have collaborations if I want to start conversations, right? Let's say I do platform somebody or have a conversation with someone on a particular topic, but they have a completely skewed view on something else. how do I go about that and still keep myself or like keep my views, because like my audience or my platform exists and is heavily dependent on the fact that I align with the principles that I have, right? So how do you stay true to that and also have those conversations, right? That's definitely something that at least a creator space, as we explore these, that's something that we need to figure out, definitely. um because as I said, আমি জয় সোলের এই জিনিসটা রিয়েলাইজ করার পর, আচ্ছা আমি জয় সোলের নিয়ে কথা বলছি কিন্তু জয় সোলের তো ট্রান্সফোবিক ভিউজ আছে, দোজ ডু নট রিফ্লেক্ট মাই ভিউজ। সো দ্য ফার্স্ট থিং আই decided to do is that, oh acha ami ei video ta amar main feed theke shorai, because first of all I don't want people to think that I consider these people as role models, because as soon as you use words like role models or idols, you essentially mane associate that person or their entire identities or the structures of their identities and beliefs as part of that role model aspect, right? Because once you consider somebody a role model, you have to look at different parts of them as well. And I feel like, yes, we can consume content from people, we can recommend content from certain people, but to consider people as role models, I think we need to do a little bit more due diligence for those things. And I think that's where the separation and distinction comes. Outside of that, one other thing that you mentioned that I wanted to touch on was that your journey of joining the manosphere, and the whole idea of self-improvement to look more attractive. Um, let's assume if you're straight, you're trying to look more attractive for the opposite gender. Um, who are we, first of all, like my question is like, who are we getting this idea from in terms of like what the opposite gender finds attractive? And the main question is like, who do you want to be attractive to? One, and then two, what do they want or what do they find attractive, right? Because what I've seen is that within the manosphere space, these people who are preaching self-improvement, like, let's be very honest, like your average intelligent woman is not looking for that, is not looking for a gym bro who cannot talk about anything other than how much protein they've had today, right? Because you bring nothing to the table, bro. Like I have there's no exchange of intelligence or intellect. So when we look into these self-improvement content, like, are we listening to other men who are telling us like, hey, listen, this is what I think women find attractive? And if they do, which women do they think find this attractive? Because I can tell you which women do find that attractive. Women who are also part of the patriarchy, women who are flag bearers of patriarchy, women who, the term that we use for women, like pick me girls, right? Like those are the women who participate in this grift economy, and like kind of give these people the validation that they're looking for. But what you genuinely have to realize and like take a step back is that who do you want to attract? And I think as soon as you answer that question, I think other things become very easy. And in terms of like prioritizing who you're particularly focusing on, in terms of like কাদের জন্য if you are going to perform for the right people, right? And while you're performing, try to learn the things that you're performing so that you can embody them at some point. That I feel like that's my take on it. Like if you have no idea how to do it and you're going to perform, do it for the right people so that at some point you learn. Because like I mean, you're not learning anyways, so might as well.
No, it's a very good point you actually pointed out. The fact that a lot of the times it's like, for example, if you take the clavicular, that influencer, right? The clavicular, so not just clavicular, or say gym bros or whatnot, it's an idea of what guys think, what like, what's the word?
What guys
I had
think,
the,
what
I
girls
had the
think is attractive?
yeah, what guys think girls find attractive in a man, but then I think it comes across the filter of how, for example, matters of quote unquote size, like how big you are as a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've seen real like videos online of like, gym bros talking about like, oh, I actually have more men hitting me up to actually ask how to go about there, because it's an idea of, again, this is, I think, problem is that divorcing real life experience from an idea of what you think it is, right? And actually taking that from somebody else is actually wrong. So for example, Rom Jada Bolona, like what what the other person or finds attractive, right? Not like what you think. And then the optics of it is also, oh, if I am with somebody, am I with that person? Or if I'm trying to attract, a particular person, am I trying to attract that person because I am actually attracted to that, or I think that's what other people find attractive, so that, oh, okay, it's that whole signaling. I may not exactly like or find that attractive myself personally. Again, it kind of goes back to like preferences and knowing like what your preferences are. I was like, okay, cool, right? Because it's a sliding scale, right? So then there's that. I was just reminded of that because a lot of times, oh, you're actually seeing somebody, but you don't have a lot of good chemistry, whatnot, or there's a lot of mismatch because I'm a, yeah. So coming back to here, I mean, Jetta, what I wanted to actually kind of add up on that is that in the Bangladeshi context, I think we ourselves have a lot of our issues that are actually we're trying to articulate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these ideas, they kind of come, say, from the West or the internet or whatnot. I think what we need to kind of rephrase it and kind of look at our own problems and be like, আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে আমরা এটা আমাদের মতো কিভাবে মানে সমাধান করব. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, my take is that there isn't a quote unquote war. It has to be one of complementarity, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for example, Rohan Jada Bolona, like, the things that you like in women and like, the being able to emote or whatnot. I mean, যেটা কথা বললাম যে there's positive things about the men in our life and masculinity. And these things should complement instead of actually putting each other down. আমার মনে হচ্ছে আমাদের সমাজের মধ্যে I think we have a lot of this toxicity as it is. এখন now with the manosphere coming in, I think exacerbates it. আর এখানে
Right.
at the same time, I think the platforms that we're on, it makes things a bit more a lot harder because I'm just like now a lot of the exposure that you guys all have, we all have, is through quick reactionary content, right? I always say this to people, like, read more, man. Read. If you read, then you are much more well versed in a lot of things. Like, for example, to me, Laura Bates কথা বললো না, I was like, oh, why don't you, I would suggest, like, check out these authors, right? For example, Warren Farrell. I'm sure, I don't know if you heard of that name, Warren Farrell. He's like one of the original feminists, and he talked about
Yeah.
his challenges talking about men's issues and whatnot, and his experience with like feminist organizations, right? And then there's a lot of other books. I think this is the problem. যে nuance যখন থাকে না কেন, because we're always reactionary. We're like, oh, and then we have a certain idea in our heads instead of being like, আচ্ছা দাঁড়াও, what is out there? How do we articulate it? আর বাংলাদেশের সমাজের কথা বলছিলাম because I think I want to have, it's good to see like people like yourself, for example, and then other creators, Keke, Bushra Appa. Bushra Appa is one of my favorite ones, and she talks about sex education and whatnot, right? And then yeah, all those other ones. Also even the quote unquote manosphere content creators, because I've seen a few, I think, mentioned in your comments, and I was like, okay, I see them, and it's like, okay, what are you trying to get at? Because it's, again, like I said, it's the grift economy. Because a lot of serious discussions that actually really help people, it gets co-opted. It gets co-opted by people who actually are gonna sell you something. Oh, buy my course, buy this or buy that, instead of actually being like, hang on, what actually does help? Anyway,
Right.
I
Yeah.
think I've said a lot.
Is it okay if I interrupt? Yeah. This
Yeah.
is a question that Muffin asked while you guys were speaking, and that is, would you say that self-improvement content from the manosphere feeds into body dysmorphia?
100%. Definitely.
Yes. Yes.
Because
I
as
will.
some
Well,
no,
go
no,
ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, as someone who deals with body dysmorphia, I know 100% that it does, because, and I've spoken about it at length as well, is because like uh this is very like, this is an interesting space, because like you think that these people are looking out for you because the name of the brand is self improvement, but that has a lot of negative connotations to it, because it's built on the idea of just discipline, not
Hmm.
on the ideas of that nutrition, health, and mental health all go in
Friends.
hand in hand. Yeah, and
Yeah.
community and a lot of other things, right? And this is why like I love creators like Ben Carpenter and like Liam Layton, the Plant Scent,
I don't know
because
about those guys, but I'm looking it up.
yeah, Ben Carpenter and Liam Layton, like I can't rave about them enough, because like these two people like have genuine information about nutrition and diet and workout and like healthy recipes and stuff. Liam is more focused on
Oh
like
yeah,
food.
BTC Carpenter. He's great. He's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the thing, Jay. These people will tell you that your body is not necessarily just about, oh, if you go to the gym every day, you will gain muscles. Like, but it's not just that. Like, it's about sustainability. It's about a lifestyle. It's about, can you do this for the rest of your life? Because otherwise, if all you care about is looking good, and then you forego everything in your life for 6 months and end up looking good, you can't do that
But
for the
you're
rest of your life, because you need to have fun, you need friends, you need other things in your life. তুমি 5 দিন পরে আবার weight gain করে ফেলবা সবগুলা, and then you're going to hate yourself again. What's the point? You're going to go into the self-loathing echo chamber once again. The thing is finding sustainability, and thing is acknowledging the fact that not all of those things are completely in your control. There's hormones, there's genetics, there's a lot of other things that uh, attribute to how you look, how you're shaped, and all of these things. We're South Asian. We're going to have lower belly fat. It's
I
genetic.
did. I feel attacked. Thank you. I'm
But
kidding.
that's the thing. Like, and we
No, no, no.
just we're in this space where these manosphere creators tell us, Jib, it's your fault if you have a certain type of body. It's your fault if you want it differently and you're not doing anything about it. But that's not the fucking case.
I
Like,
think
there's so much that goes into it.
হ্যাঁ এখানে ওই সাইকোলজিক্যাল ফ্লগিং করার কোনো দরকার নাই, কারণ আই থিঙ্ক আমাদের সমাজে অলরেডি যথেষ্ট পরিমাণে এরকম হয়। হ্যাঁ, সব তোমার দোষ, সব তোমার দোষ। হ্যাঁ, we have that already, right, as is. And then
Yeah.
I think body dysmorphia কথা বললাম না, and yeah, actually body dysmorphia is a real thing. I will say this, I also have had that, like even going to the gym or even not going to the gym, right? You know,
Yeah.
or booty hole, love handles or whatnot. Like, okay, it actually changes. And the other thing is that influencer culture, this is the issue. I'm sure you've seen with examples such as the Liver King. You find out that these guys are on the juice. There's no way. It's the same with like I think with women's beauty standards, right? Male beauty
Yeah.
standards or male physique standards are like yeah, it's if it's too good to be true, it probably is, because the thing is, it's a spectrum. At the same time, if you, yeah, sure, on one level, yeah, there is accountability, and the other thing is self-denigration. Because the thing is, if you start denigrating yourself, hey, nijike shame, because oh, I'm worthless or whatnot, when you start like, no, it's a process. And I think
Yeah.
what ends up happening is that a lot of the frustration and anger, right? I think what needs to happen is that, hang on a minute, like take a step back and it's like, where is this coming from? Just asking that question actually can be like, where am I, like for example, a content creator, dekhe, I always say that, like, if you read more, then you actually kind of figure out that, oh, it's a process and it's gonna take time for results. And more than anything, having a sort of ideal of oneself is good, but to be so invested in it, to be like to the exclusion of everything else, it becomes harmful in the sense that,
Yeah.
no, I have an idea about it, but then you're closing off yourself to, hang on a minute, what's my body saying, what are the people around me saying, and being more aware of that. And I touch I've read something doesn't necessarily mean I have to follow that. I also have my own agency and then be like, okay, I want to customize my own way of actually going about through life, because that's what actually power is. You're having the power to actually change things about yourself. Sure,
Yeah.
people will say things, people will comment things, like, yeah, like I'll joke, like, I was gonna tell you the story about Ujo Bologna being straight and being performative, like, oh, I have to prove how straight I am by being attracted to girls. And if you're not showing interest, right, the opposite sex, then you're gay. And I was like, hang on a minute, what? And I think on some level, silver lining there is that I'm more tolerant towards people of other orientation and whatnot. I have no problem with that. And I think the security actually comes from having experienced that and being like, okay, again, I will say this. Yes, I have a lot of, for example, anger issues. It's still there. It's not going away. It's a process. At the same time, and when it comes to, for example, orientation, I know who I am. I know who I'm attracted to, and I know what I like, right? And I think it's always a process. People will always shame you for it. People will always be like, oh, what is this? For example, if I talk about depression or asking about the guys, like, are you sleeping all right? Are you, that sort of thing. There's actually always a reaction at first. But then I think once you get past that, then they'll be like, okay, cool. And the other thing I also want to say, just want to add, face-to-face conversation হইলে অনেক সময় কি হয়, ছেলেদের, like, us guys, we don't always actually talk about stuff, right? I think we always kind of talk about it peripherally to doing something, right? I'll give you an example, like, playing sports, or for example, something I do every once in a while is gaming online. Discord এসে কথা বলতে আড্ডা মারতেছি, and then somebody will say something dismissive or whatnot, or just going through shit and whatnot. And I think ওই যে রোহন, তুমি একটা, you actually made a video about shutting up, right? ওই যে you
Right.
like একটা ভিডিও ছিল না যেখানে just to shut up, like, for the men or something.
Okay.
হ্যাঁ, ওটা তো বলছিলাম, but I think I want to rephrase it by saying that instead of shutting up, try listening. Because when you listen, right, then you can actually gather a lot of things. And I don't necessarily mean
Right.
listening to women per se, but listening to yourself and also what the other guys are saying. Right?
Yeah. So that was my
Yeah.
point with the video. Like, that was obviously like very short, clickbaity.
I know,
but, like,
it's
that
very
was the whole point.
clickbaity.
Like,
Yeah, I saw
you shut up and you listen.
Yes, I know. But my takeaway is that, again, my feedback is that it should be like, to listen. But of course, that's a skill. It is a skill to develop. Yeah. And I think it's not a one size fits all. Sorry, Mike, you want to say something?
Oh, no, it's okay. I just wanted to ask that to what degree does this self improvement part of the manosphere actually help men holistically?
Okay. That's I'll answer that question actually, but like I wanted to kind of ask Mafin and Zuhair, je, do either of you disagree with what I've said or what Tibu Bhai has said? Like, do you think the manosphere self-improvement ideologies are actually positive? And then I think we can kind of touch on that because, like,
Well, I don't think the manosphere is entirely good or entirely bad. Some parts encourage self improvement, like we've talked about, and discipline and all the other issues that might arise and that might be general in, day to day lives of men. However, some parts can, like promote resentment and oversimplify complex social issues or discourage healthy emotional expression rather than asking whether the manosphere is good or bad. I think it's more useful to ask why so many young men are drawn to it in the first place. So I'd really like an answer to that.
Okay. Um, yeah, definitely can answer that. Zuhair, do you want to say anything here before I get into that conversation?
Yeah, so I think some manosphere is not totally like self like body centered. It
Mm-hmm.
can create some insecurities, but it's not totally it doesn't totally suggest body dysmorphia. Yeah,
Okay, why do you say that?
because there are other aspects of manosphere which is discipline, time management,
Uh-huh.
character. So it doesn't totally contribute to the body or yeah, it does have concerns about how you look and how you how's your body shape, but it does not totally centers itself to body. Yeah.
There's a there's a phrase that's I guess used a lot. It's owning your shit, basically. I think there is basically being very objective about where one is in terms of say physical fitness or financially or socially.
Yeah,
I
but
think
manosphere is a broad term that
it
describes
is
a
a
lot of
broad term. It is a broad term, but the thing is, I think what ends up happening is that a lot of the reason why it gets villainized is the cold, cold-hearted, calculative aspect of it. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Are
yeah,
you listening?
like
Right.
how it's
Um,
marketed by influencers such as Andrew Tate and many more like him.
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ ওটা তো আছে because again at the end of the day you've seen if you're seeing something front and center and very loud, right, you have to see, okay, what did they gain out of it? For example, Andrew Tate selling his courses, selling something, right? You have to
Mm.
look at also আচ্ছা এগুলো যে বলতেছে, what did they gain out of that, right?
But how
I'm
do
sure.
we bring awareness to such issues?
Okay, so তুমি একটা কথা বলো না, like why are young men being the way it is because I think we're still in a very in the form that was actually used to come here, right? I actually said something about things have actually changed in the sense of it's not all doom and gloom per se. Eh, a lot of the confusion is actually about how do we evolve in terms of how the world is now. At the same time, there's a lot of things about this world that is still, for example, Roham Jeta bolo na, like yeah, it like Bangladesh in the context of Bangladesh, yes, there's a lot of things that actually is archaic, right? It needs reformation and whatnot, right? At the same time, so I think for young for men, right, boys and men, I think the traditional institutions and the rituals and whatnot, it it kind of conflicts with the change in the what's the word, in the environment, in the sense that, for example, can we agree that overall women's rights overall, like over the last decades, that has been an improvement? Yes. So then now it's like the discussion is that, okay, wait, so what is the role of a man when it comes to traditional gender role expectations and whatnot, right? হ্যাঁ, যেখানে মনে করো, like yeah, so for example, if I'm not the sole breadwinner, right, what is the expectation of me, or because there is that adjustment period that needs to happen, right? And I think what it is a reaction. So if you're trying to double down on traditional roles versus like, okay, wait, hang on a minute, what is our place, how do we actually adjust, and how do we adapt? হ্যাঁ, ওখানে adaptation হলে, and I think that's why it's actually good, Jay. Okay, there's this other guy, the Tin Man. I don't know if you know about it, Rohan. Right? He talks about that in the UK
Acha.
context, and I think a lot of the times Ajay, going back to the beginning of the discussion, being able to
Mhm.
articulate the issues that we face, because we're not able to do that, I think we're being reactionary. And I think we need to have that space, Chacha. Let's figure that out. And part of that, of course, is, improving yourself. Yes. But again, that gets co-opted into socio-political thing, where they say, oh, acha, we need to go back to,
Okay, can I
Stone
ask
Age.
something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, according to World Health Organization, youngsters aged from 18 to 19 are most likely to commit suicide, and this is the age group that's online the most. In many countries, men who are likely to commit suicide than women, as for example, in the US, men account for suicide 4 times more than the rate of women, according to the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. Do you think this manosphere thingy has to do with the rate of suicide for men going up, especially the youngsters?
So I'll tell you, there's a bunch of things that I want to say, right? So first of all, the original question of like whether or not self improvement content in general is a holistic solution. Um, I That's a gray area for me because like I feel like the way it's portrayed and pitched to men is very important, and where it's coming from is very important as well, because I feel like এটা যদি একটা পার্টিকুলার জায়গা থেকে আসে, ওই জায়গার মানুষজনের বিলিফ সিস্টেম যদি একটা সার্টেন রকম হয়, there is a problem because you are not just following their content, you're not just following what they do and how they approach it, but you're also potentially in their echo chamber where you can very easily be swayed by some of their other ideologies. That, and second is something that you guys were saying in terms of like um taking certain things and not taking other things. I think that's also a problematic point of view, is because um it has to be a holistic solution, or it has to be something that's inherently positive, because the question remains like, um, just because somebody has good intentions doesn't mean that the impact of their actions is positive, right? Let's assume that the manosphere creators want um, good discipline, good time management, or whatever. Those are all good things, but their approach might be more negative than somebody else, where you could get other forms of information. And I think that's very important to understand, because like if I give you my personal example, I made a video about it যে আমি when I went to Bangladesh in 2023, আমাকে একজন this is something that Tibu bhai also touched on. I don't know your actual name, so I'm just gonna refer you as that. But আমি যখন বাংলাদেশ গেছিলাম, আমাকে somebody said that, like somebody made a comment on my physique, and that really got to me, and which made me spiral into like going into this whole idea of self discipline. And over the course of like the next 9 months, I lost 40 kilos of weight, and felt terrible because I thought that my biggest problem was my weight, but that didn't solve the way I viewed myself. And it also does not take into account other aspects of your life and other aspects of how you live life and how things happen to you. For example, Jay, I have a very good routine, a very healthy diet and whatnot, and then আমার 2 মাস আগে আমার গাড়ির অ্যাক্সিডেন্ট হয়েছে, and এখন আমার অনেক কাজ আছে, and there's things that are not going well in my life. I have bad mental health. I have a lot of stress. I'm not sleeping well. And I don't have a way to get to and back from the gym properly and maintain a healthy schedule. And my entire diet and all that discipline is completely fucked because nobody teaches you that life can also happen. And that is the problem with stringent ideologies like what the manosphere, discipline teaches you. And I think that's something that we need to kind of take into account. Life can happen. You need to learn how to have grace on yourself as well while you navigate through these important phases of your life where you're practicing discipline, you're practicing time management, and all of those things. Because again, as I said, where are these information pieces of information coming from? What kind of readings are you doing? So one of the books that one of the authors that Tio Bhai mentioned was Warren Farrell, and I've made a video about Warren Farrell's The Myth of Male Power in the past, and he has said some extremely disturbing things in that book, and he disproportionately victimizes men as a ploy to be some form of a feminist rhetoric, and I feel like that's very problematic. So if there are good things to be taken from those book, I don't necessarily think that those are positive things, because if somebody has those regressive views, those problematic views, somebody who not only does not believe in date rape, but believes that the ideology of sexual, like date rapes being considered sexual assault, is an assault on men's rights, I feel like that person probably cannot have good or positive um, impacts or conversations, right? Um, Warren Farrell has said stuff like, "Is unemployment to a man the psychological equivalent of rape to a woman?" Which is an absurd thing to say, right? So those are things that you need to question, and that's the point. I feel like that I wanted to bring that parallel to answer both the point of view Bhai and also Mafin and Zuhair, is that I disagree with the ideology that there are good things about manosphere and there are bad things about manosphere, because if a space is primarily built on certain regressive views and aspects, I think holistically all of it is the problem. But what we need to understand is like why people join it and what those ideologies are, which comes into what Mafin said about whether or not the manosphere and these kind of content contribute to the rising suicide rates, for which I was going to refer to a paper that was sent to me by Monisha. So Monisha and Masuda, they contributed on a paper among other people. It's They wrote a paper. They wrote a white paper on the it's called the transfield. Sorry,
Can you
transdisciplinary
share the
field
link?
research.
Maybe.
Yeah, I will. I can transdisciplinary field research training on the manosphere. And one of the things that they really focus on there is the ideology and like the guidance gap, right? That Men don't enter the manosphere because they hate women. They enter because they're emotionally lost and no one was there to guide them. And that's the trope that the manosphere creators uh, kind of rely on to get people in. But then you're indoctrinated and induced into this chamber and space where these conversations of negative views on women are had, right? Then you have these ideologies where you hate on feminists because you think that there are toxic feminists and that's somehow also harmful. But what we don't realize is that can never be on the same level as misogyny, right? Like we very easily compare misogyny and misandry, which can never be the same thing, because misogyny leads to rape and murder, misandry leads to men's feelings being hurt. And again, I'm not invalidating men's feelings being hurt, but we can't compare, right? um, but I also believe that the emotional state of men is a self-induced prison because of how we approach emotional vulnerability in men, and because whenever men do open up, um, they don't get that community or that space. And that's what I they really dive deep into these ideas in the paper. And I think it's very interesting for a lot of people to read, that it starts from loneliness, but it builds into a lot of other things. And I think one of the biggest things that people need to be doing is reading. And I think they also have they interview 4 different people who have in some form consumed manosphere content. Some people who were past consumers, some people who are current consumers, and what they've seen from them, um, is that even though there is a spectrum of usage, there's a spectrum of views, they all kind of connect back to the same small ideology that ঘুরে ফিরে at the end of the day, um, your idea of loneliness or how you feel about the world and your state as a man and your mental health somehow always relates back to it's not your fault, right? And I think that's what I mean by it being like some form of a self-induced space, is because like this is something that we can genuinely work on, and we
Is
refuse to
this
do
one of
so.
the reasons why like men sexual assault survivors don't usually open up about their experience to the media?
I mean, why they don't open up to the media is a separate conversation, in my opinion. I feel like they don't have the agency to do that because of how patriarchy and societal structures are created, because there's a lot of stigma related to that. If a very easy example is Sadia Jahan Prova, who is a prominent actress, who was a prominent actress in Bangladesh, and whose private video was leaked by her ex, who was trying to obviously damage her reputation, and was successful because আমরা as a society এখনো প্রভাকে blame করি for her privacy being breached by her ex, because all we can do in terms of women is sexualize them. We we have such a hard time humanizing women that all we consider women as are sexual objects, and that's why আমরা এখনো পর্যন্ত এই জিনিসগুলোকে স্টিগমাটাইজ করি যে when we this is going to sound awful, but that's what happens in our society, is that when we're thinking of sexual assault or rape, we are essentially thinking about the act, or the sexual act, right? And that itself dehumanizes and sexualizes the woman, which is why we stigmatize it. I feel like, obviously, this is my opinion. Like, I'm pretty sure I can
Yeah,
find
but how
papers or
is it
studies.
relevant to,
Mhm.
male sexual assault survivors not speaking up or even filing a complaint?
Oh, sorry, you meant male sexual assault survivors.
Male,
I
yeah.
got that wrong.
Male
I
survivors,
heard female.
basically.
Right. Uh, definitely. Like, if you imagine like female survivors not being able to open up their own sexual assaults, এখানে তো male survivors their প্রশ্নই ওঠে না, first of all, um, because men are not accepting of the fact that, um, like, they will consider it weak. Why would you let that happen to you? One.
Yeah.
And two, and
Okay,
they
let's finish.
victimize the woman, sorry, they victimize the man for something that happened to them, even though it wasn't their fault, right? They
You mean
simply
victim
just don't
blaming?
honor.
Victim
Yeah,
blaming.
victim blaming, but in a
I
much
mean,
worse
Well,
way than
yeah, when I
for
was a
women. Yeah.
kid,
yeah,
like
that
I
was
was, yeah, you go
Sorry. Yeah.
ahead,
Marfin Bolo.
Deepuja. Okay, so when I was a kid, like there was this, guy who lived down our apartment. So like he would touch me inappropriately, and whenever I would, go up to my parents and tell them what happened to me, they would just brush it off, saying like, "Yeah, why did I like even go near him and all that?" Like, and they would just brush
Mhm.
it off instantly after that. So I get your point, but is there something we can do to change that?
I
Victim blaming,
guess.
you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah, I
think one
think
of
it,
the
it comes
things.
more from our culture. But yeah, hang on.
I
I
think
would just want to
sex ed is a
a
very good.
few. I want to take a
Yeah.
few mental like book notes, like bookmarks, right? Finn, right? You were talking about suicide rates and survivors of sexual assault or
Yes.
survivors, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
because
actually
all
really
are
really
connected.
interesting because yeah. So as far as suicide goes, yes, that is actually a major thing amongst like the 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 youngsters, right? And I myself have actually spoken to, again, this is I do this in my personal life and actually talk to kids as an older man, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I think I'm gonna go back to what I said, right? It's the more personal that I think something is, the more universal it actually happens to be, right? And yes, I'm gonna play the devil's advocate in the sense that Rom, it was interesting that you deferred back to women as victim, because the thing is, at the same time, with men having like there's a suicide among men and also being victims of sexual assault, right? I think this is a very important discussion to have had, and not to say that it negates any sort of discussion about women being victims, because there are. আমার কথা হচ্ছে যে এই যেটা হলো যে ভিকটিম ব্লেমিংটা না করে, যেটা হচ্ছে প্রভাব উদাহরণ দিলাম না, হ্যাঁ, it actually is a
Mhm.
perfect example, right? Oh, and then মাফিন কথা বলো না যে তুমি ওর কাছে গেলা কেন, right? And I think it's more so that is negating the lived experience of people. Hey, like I've heard of experiences on the sense that of people being assaulted and molested as a kid, and it's really tragic. And I think even I myself would actually talk about it, and I think like there have been instances, and I think it's a much broader discussion to have had where this culture of silencing. Hey, I mean, manosphere নিয়ে কথা বললে I can single that out, right? And yeah, sure, kind of apology, you have to be strong and whatnot, but I think what that ends up happening is that you're suppressing yourself so much that like, oh wait, hang on a minute, am I secure in myself to actually speak out and actually call out injustice? হ্যাঁ, oh acha, মানে তোমার এটা হইলো, oh, like for example, um, again, it's not comparing. It's not like men being more victims or women being more victims or whatnot. It's the nature of the crime, right? Rape or sexual assault,
Yeah.
right? It is wrong in and of itself, and how it's dealt with legally, right, as well as like societally. যে মাফিনের কথা বললো, and I think on some level a much more broader discussion needs to have had where when and how will we when we start calling out these kinds of behaviors. হ্যাঁ, because the thing is, once we আমাদের কথা হচ্ছে যে this is the other thing I've actually noticed যে বাংলাদেশে, হ্যাঁ, in আমাদের যে vocabulary আছে না, যে কথাবার্তা যে বলি, হ্যাঁ, if we're framing it in, the language is really important. I think we're able to, like for example, Roham, I'm sure you did say once you were in Canada, you were able to actually come across these things and actually think about these things and then process it and go through that, because the environment is there for you to actually have those resources, right? So what needs to happen for us to have that back in Bangladesh, right? And I think in the same time,
Have
there's
what back in Bangladesh?
for বললাম যে Roham was talking about how he started, again, this is my understanding of it, Roham, you can correct me, right? Thinking about these things and actually seeing like, oh, I have privilege or whatnot. At the same time, struggling to actually deal with his own things. Like, যে রকম তুমি বলো না 2 মাস আগে তোমার accident, I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know about this. You're actually struggling with these things, right? And you're trying to figure it out, right? And to try to have those conversations, right? I think part of the reason is why I'm gonna go back to why is it that it's easier for us to talk to the women in our lives about it, is because that's how women actually do, and that's good. That's good. And I think what needs to happen is that we need to actually start having those conversations amongst men, right? Because
Right,
it's
I'm
almost
gonna
always.
interrupt.
Yeah.
Apologies, but we are nearing the end of the allocated time for the discussion. So, in the next 10 minutes, we will wrap this up. Okay. So,
Okay.
if you
Okay,
guys have
I'll wrap
any
it up.
like closing
Yeah.
thoughts or anything like that, let's keep it concise and brief, and finish this up. Zuhair, do you want to add
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, so Romba, I have a question.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tibu bhai, shesh kore na, and then
Yeah,
Zuhair, you can chip in, and we can finish this.
Yeah. I'm gonna speak to what Marfin was saying, and then I'll go to what Roham said, and to wrap it up, right? So Marfin, তুমি বলছিলা যে, yeah, I think it needs to be a broader conversation that needs to be have had, right? Without naming and shaming and whatnot. I think we need to be a bit more real about it, because the thing is, I think once we actually start doing that, it's sort of like self-serving in a way. It actually does help the women in our lives as well, because if we actually
But what
start
do you
talking
mean by
about,
being real?
sorry.
By the way, what do you mean by being real?
Being real now, as in, I'm sorry, maybe you misheard. We need to address it amongst ourselves, because if we start doing that, right? And I know it's a very broad suggestion to have, like বলা সহজ কিন্তু করতে গেলে কঠিন, and I think we need to kind of figure out uh, that space, like, how do we actually address those things, where, for example, like, sexual assault, or how we, you asked a question about porn, right? How it actually affects us, right, in the chat. Do you think porn have something to do with loneliness? I think this is an interesting thing, because I feel like porn is like a buffer in the sense that
Right.
it kind of subdues you to actually being able to have that interaction with the opposite sex or whoever you're interested in.
Yeah.
And I think
I
it kind
think we
of
digress
warps our,
with that. So
yeah.
let's kind of bring it back to, like, if you had the closing remark, we make that.
Okay.
We'll let Zohair ask the question. Then I have a couple things to say. I just want to make sure we get all of those in.
Okay. Just one last thing. I think let's keep this in an ongoing conversation, like a process. And I'll definitely
Yeah.
look into what you brought up about Warren Farrell, because it's like, oh, that was actually kind of news to me. I was like, okay. So it's interesting that you actually mentioned those things. I was like, okay, maybe that's time to actually reread it and process it and actually bring that up into the discussion.
Yeah, I have a really
Um,
old video that I made about somebody who suggested that book in one of my NGLs. So, like, I pointed the specific stuff out. But yeah,
hmm.
it's very interesting. But yeah, Zuhair, you wanted to say something.
Yeah,
yeah.
ask
So
a
I'm
question.
I'm going back to Manosphere. So my question is, what do you think young men are actually searching for when they turn to these spaces?
I think they're, as I said, like, one of the biggest things is they're searching for guidance,
Hmm.
and which is one of the things that, like, I I don't blame the people who follow or fall into the cracks of the manosphere. I do blame the grifters and the creators. But the reason I don't blame them, because these are impressionable and most of the times kids, who all they're looking for is a big brother, right? Like some form of guidance in terms of, like, আমার লাইফে হয়তো কিছু জিনিস হইতেছে না, like আমি, like, there could be an like array of things, like আমি একটু ডিসিপ্লিন চাই আমার লাইফে, আমি I want to look better, I want to speak better, I want to be more confident, I want to be able to speak to women, I want to, you know, get a girlfriend, and এই জিনিসগুলা থেকে they're like, আচ্ছা আমি এখন কার কাছে যাব এই জিনিসগুলা নিয়ে জানতে। Obviously, if you can't speak to women, you're not going to speak to women to ask them how to get women, right? You're going to talk to or consume content from other men who are very confidently telling you that this is the only way to get women, right? And সো আমার কাছে মনে হয় যে ওই ল্যাক অফ গাইডেন্সটা, ওই ল্যাক অফ রোল মডেলস, ওই ল্যাক অফ কনভারসেশনস, এগুলার থেকে মানুষ ম্যানোস্ফিয়ারের দিকে যায়। And then, I'm not saying that there isn't a notion of self-improvement. Sure, there is, but it's, in my opinion, based on hollow and shallow aspects that do more harm than good, which is why I don't subscribe to that, and I actively ask people to not subscribe to that. And I think এই জিনিসটাই আমাদের kind of figure out করা দরকার যে আমরা কেন এই স্পেসটাতে যাচ্ছি, and এই যে ল্যাক or এই যে গ্যাপটা আমাদের মধ্যে, এই গ্যাপটা কি আমরা অন্য কোনো ভালো স্পেস থেকে ফুলফিল করতে পারতেছি কিনা, and are we choosing the manosphere because it's easier and more accessible to us, because the alternative is probably opening ourselves up to do things that we're not comfortable with doing, right? If that's the case, maybe we start by asking those questions. যে, আচ্ছা, why do I feel uncomfortable doing these certain things? যে, আচ্ছা, ঠিক আছে, আমি ম্যানোস্ফিয়ারে যাচ্ছি বিকজ আমি মেয়েদের সাথে কথা বলতে পারি না। আমি মেয়েদের সাথে কথা বলতে পারি না বলে আমি ম্যানোস্ফিয়ারে যাইতেছি ছেলেদের কাছ থেকে কথা শুনতে। জিনিসটা একটু আইরনিক লাগে না? So, those things, I feel like there are better role models, and I think if there is a lack of good role models, I think that's a gap that good men who claim to be nice guys should fill. Like, if you claim to be a good man, if you get pissed off when women say all men and be like, আমি তো খারাপ না, আপনি যদি খারাপ না হয়ে থাকেন, the best way to prove that you are not bad is to help another man who is potentially going to become a bad man if you don't intervene, right? You being a good man does not do any good for any man or woman unless you are doing something about it. So just
Yeah, I
claiming
agree.
to be a
Yeah.
good man doesn't do much. Basically, you are saying, when you say that I am a good man, all you are saying is that I am not a rapist. That is a very, very low standard to have as a human being, right? So I think that's a narrative that we should be changing.
I didn't
Outside of
understand
that,
that statement that like being a good man means that you're not a rapist. Like,
Mhm.
I just didn't
Oh,
understand it.
so that what I mean by that is that when most people say that I am a good man, what they're essentially saying is that I don't sexually assault women, therefore I am a good man.
Oh, I
But
get it.
that is not a good standard, right? Like, there must be
Very low
other things
threshold.
that you should be doing to be able to call yourself a good man. How are you contributing? What is the net positive outcome that you bring to the table? That's what I mean, right? And the other thing that I wanted to touch on, in that kind of summarizes most of this, is what Tibu Bhai kind of mentioned, is that when we talk about what the solution is, when we talk about how to prevent men from getting into this rabbit hole of the manosphere, yes, as you said, not victim blaming is very important. And when I say that I believe it's a self-induced prison for men, I don't mean that it's men's fault. I blame patriarchy, the system, right? And when I say the system, and I say that এই সিস্টেমের কারণে আমাদের যা দশা সবকিছু পেট্রিয়ার্কির দোষ, that's my opinion. But that doesn't necessarily mean যে আমি হাল ছেড়ে বসে আছি, যে কিছু তো করার নাই, পেট্রিয়ার্কি is fact. এখন কি করা যায়, চলো ফিফা খেলি? No, that's not a solution. The solution is much rather in teaching ourselves how to unlearn the tools of patriarchy that chain us. And the way we do that is with empathy, right? Because when we talk about why women are able to communicate with other women and are able to be there and support other women is primarily, in my opinion, the biggest thing that women possess that men right now don't, most men don't, uh, is empathy. Is because one, we weren't shown empathy when we were growing up, therefore we don't know what it feels like and what it looks like. And two, we have never practiced empathy within our spaces because of that. So going back to what Mafin said about your parents not believing or brushing it off, right? Those are instances of not showing empathy, right? Because at that point you should come first. But for them, social stigma came first, right? And I think a lot of that can also be solved. And the conversation about pornography, there's a lot of things that we brought into those are uh, much larger conversations to be had individually, but I think holistic sexual education from earlier ages is very important, especially within families and within friendships.
Earlier
Positive sexual
ages, could
conversation.
you give an example, like at specific what age it would be appropriate for a boy or a girl to know about these things?
I mean, I can't really pinpoint an age. Like I'd have to look into like studies and like medical science and whatnot. But in my opinion, um, any age where you think like a parent thinks that their child is able to have any form of uh, cognitive reception to these conversations, like the same age for men as it is for women when you want to teach them about good touch and bad touch, because those conversations should be had not just with women but also men, and to let them know that it's okay to come to their parents and talk to them about it, because the way you know that it's okay to talk to your parents about these things is because your parents taught you about good touch and bad touch, and then you grow up knowing that I have a safe space with my parents. Otherwise you grow up with some resentment যে আমার বাপ মা কোনোদিনও তাদের সাথে এই জিনিসগুলো নিয়ে কথা বলতে দেয় নাই। সো বড় হয়ে when you lose touch with your family and your parents are like আমার ছেলে তো আমার সাথে এখন আর কথা বলে না, well they need to really think about why that is, right? Because you never created that space for them to come to you and have those conversations. So বাবা মাদেরও I mean it's too late to fix our parents now, but what we can do is fix ourselves for our children, so that when we can have those early conversations, so that they have a safe space in us to open up and have those conversations, so that we know that when that person is impressionable and looking for guidance, they come to you as a parent, not some guy making manosphere content, right? Because if they are going to that manosphere content person, they're definitely not coming to you and opening up and telling you what they've seen.
I have
And
a
that's
question.
what you need to, yeah, that's going to be the last question, and then we're going to finish it off after.
If you remove the manosphere tomorrow, let's say,
Hmm.
what do you think would realistically fill the gap for young men who are currently drawn to it?
Something else that's similar to the manosphere, like that's
What?
the thing, like we we name the manosphere because we have a name for it, right? But in my opinion the actual name for this is patriarchy. Like that's the real enemy, right? Because this creates a sense of entitlement in men, where and this creates the sense of inability to open up and empathize and have emotions in men. So there will be some other echo chamber that tries to monetize. So that paper that I mentioned um, kind of touches on this, that the algorithms monetize loneliness in men, right? And if it wasn't manosphere, something else would monetize this, because this is something that is monetizable. This is something that can be taken advantage of. So yeah, like there will always be someone who wants to take advantage of vulnerable, impressionable young men, because that avenue exists. And out to prevent that from happening, the only way we do that is by removing that avenue. And by when we say we want to remove that avenue, that means we help these vulnerable, impressionable young men by through empathy, through listening, through understanding their problems, rather than shutting them down. Because when you shut them down, they will listen to the wrong people.
Yeah, it's easier to
Yeah.
be cruel than to be kind.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, so we should close up now, I think. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. I think all of us have given their closing remarks, right?
Yep.
All
More or
right, so
less.
we will. Yes?
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm off.
Thank you
This
so
is
much for
nice.
attending and for giving your own thoughts. This has been live streamed and this will be uploaded in its entirety, and then some clips will also be uploaded on our social media pages. So thank you so much for engaging in discussion and for being vulnerable and talking about your own experiences as well.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say I want to keep this conversation going. I like I as I said, I haven't done this live webinar format before, but I think I want to open it up to a space where I can have one-on-one conversations, either live recorded or pre-recorded or off the record, because I feel like these are really interesting spaces to explore people's point of views. So
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe you
but
can do a podcast.
I do have a podcast, but what
You
I
do.
don't have is emotional capacity to handle all of these things. So hopefully,
Podcasts
if
are hard to
I,
do.
Yeah.
yeah, so once I find that headspace and capacity, I will let you guys know.
Paranai, হয়ে
We'll
যাবে.
be waiting.
Let's do that. All right. See you guys. Ciao.
See you. Take care. Thank you,
Have
everybody.
fun.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
man.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Stay safe, guys. All right. That was pretty
Okay.
good, I would say.
Yeah, that was. I mean,
These
It's
আমরা
still
অনেক
live, right?
sidetrack হয়ে গেছি,
Yeah.
but that's the thing. এটা হবে, and that's why I wanted, um, like that's also a learning experience for everybody. But I've had a lot of these panel discussions and conversations before. I know এগুলো sidetrack হয়ে যায়, and problem is যে এখানে moderatorদের kind of একটু rude ভাবে sometimes interrupt করা লাগে. Problem is আমি যদি interrupt করি, যেটা হবে যে it changes the dynamic of my conversation with them coming up, because
Yes,
they're
we
talking to
understand.
me, right? So that's also something. But again, what I would say is, now that this is done, আমি সবার clips পাচ্ছি. Clips পেয়ে I will give it to you guys, and then you can edit it. But I would also say look into, ask your editors or whoever is volunteering যে if you guys can figure out a way to kind of moderate it completely on your end,
Yes, okay.
তখন তাইলে জিনিসটা অনেক ইজি হয়ে যাবে সবার জন্য.
All right, like for future webinars?
Yeah.
Like moderation. Okay. All right.